Hey guys, welcome back to the Game Room. Today I want to talk about something that's a little bit of a contentious subject in the video game community, and that's ranking, reviewing, and scoring games. You hear people complain all the time about how certain websites maybe only give 8s and 9s and 10s to games, and there's never anything lower than that. And personally, as someone who has reviewed thousands of games, I used to be a reviewer on GameFAQs. This is something that is near and dear to my heart. I received a message one time on a review from somebody, and I had given a game that I thought was like a really bad game that was barely playable and was like had stupid subject matter and just wasn't fun, and it was just a mess. And so I gave it like a 3 out of 10. And the reviewer's comment to my review was, a 3 out of 10 is like an unplayable game. If it's just a really bad game and you didn't like it and nobody would like it, you should give it like a 7 out of 10. What? 7 out of 10? And I just don't agree with that. I think part of the problem arises from the fact that people are equating these number scores of like 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, all the way up to 100 to like the American method for grading in schools, where it's really just a 5-point scale. You have like A's, B's, C's, D's, and F's. So to them, in the middle, a C, which is like mediocre, is 70%. So that's not the way it works. We have a 10-point scale, or you're doing S tier or A tier rankings or whatever. You have to use the whole scale. There has to be a nice bell curve to even everything out. Otherwise, it's pointless. If everything's loaded at one end or another, you have to readjust the scale. And I think there's enough video games out there where we can kind of compare them all to each other and not have to readjust the scale. That being said, like always, like, comment, and subscribe, and let's dive in. So today I'm going to talk about how I objectively review games and the general feel I have about them to place them in a certain category. And I'll give some examples and let you know how I feel about it, and maybe I can help add a little bit of stability to this system. Let me know if there are any ways you like to review games, or if you have a system for it, put it down in the comments. And as always, like and subscribe as well while you're doing it. Okay guys, we're going to start right in the middle and we're going to work our way out to the extremes at either end. So right in the middle we have games that are like a 5 out of 10. These are mediocre games. If you're putting on a tier list ranking, I would give these like a D. These are games that you don't really feel strongly one way or another. Maybe they have some like really okay parts. They have some like kind of bad parts, but there's nothing at either end. There's no like fantastic gameplay or game-breaking bugs or anything like that, but maybe it's a little buggy, maybe it's kind of fun, maybe it's tedious or whatever. But regardless, your opinion of it is kind of like my dialogue right now. It's whelmed. It's not strong in either way. A good example would be something like Borderlands 3. It doesn't do anything new. It's just like the other Borderlands, but the story is like worse than the previous games. And it has a lot of like annoying bugs, like text that's too small to see, and the frame rate gets kind of low. But you can beat the game and you can get all the way through it, and you can maybe have some fun while you're doing it. But when you're done, you're just kind of like, I'm done with that. I don't really want to play that again. It wasn't really worth my time, but I didn't feel like I wasted my time. So those are games that are kind of like 5 out of 10. Not many really fall there. They usually have like good or bad qualities about them that push them to one way or the other, but there are still some that fall right in the middle. Below that, we have games that are 4s out of 10. These would still be D ranking on like a tier list. They are games that I like to call just a little bad. Maybe they're okay, but they have something about it that just keeps them from being good. Or maybe there's something a little annoying. A good example is like Doom VFR. It's a cool virtual reality game, and it's set in the modern like 2016 Doom universe, which is cool, and it plays okay. But like It causes a lot of people to get motion sickness, including me. I've never had motion sickness in anything in my entire life except for just this game. Something about the frame rate about it and the way it moves. So it kind of bumps it down to where it's not an enjoyable experience. Maybe it's not a really bad game. In general, we're talking for 4 out of 10s, not just this game. Maybe it's a little bit of an annoying experience, but you just really didn't have much fun with it. And when you're done with it, you're glad it's over. So lots of games fall into this, a lot of shovelware and stuff. It's playable, but it's just kind of like, it's not really worth your time. You're ready to move on before too long. Flipping back over to the other side, we have 6 out of 10 games. These are like okay games. They would be C tier on a tier list. They're games that are like a little fun, but maybe there's not really any component of it that really bumps it up to that next level that makes it addictive or interesting or something like that. And that's what you have to have in every game. It has to be fun, good or interesting or, revolutionary or something like that. These games maybe don't have any strong component that really hits in any of those, but it kind of limps along in them just enough to string you out and get you to play. A good example would be like Mirror's Edge Catalyst. I felt like it was worse than the original Mirror's Edge, and it was just full of like a bunch of fetch quests, and there wasn't really enough content to fill out a main game. And the points where the game could have been really cool, they kind of let me down, but it wasn't bad. The gameplay was fine. It's just sort of, it's okay. And there are games that are 6 out of 10 that are all right and that are worth your time. There are games that should be like a 2 out of 10, but they managed to raise themselves up to a 6 out of 10, and that can be surprising. Those can be a lot of fun, but in general, 6 out of 10 games are just kind of, they're okay. There's not much more to say about it. Jumping back to the other end, we're starting to get to the extremes now. We have 3 out of 10 games. These on a tier list would be like an F, and these are bad. I mean, these are bad games. Like 4 out of 10 is just a little bad. These are just purely bad. They're not fun. They're broken, or they have bad mechanics, or they're just really stupid and unenjoyable, or they're offensive, or like, who knows, something about it. You're turned off by it. You actively dislike the game a lot, and you have a lot of bad things to say about them. An example is like Natural Doctrine. It's a genre that I really like, the tactical RPG, but when this came out in Japan, it was so difficult and convoluted and just draconian that they had to patch it for Japan to make the game easier, and it's still a nightmare. And it came out here and it's not much better, really almost unplayable. These are games that are like buggy messes, like Cyberpunk 2077 when it released, or it's just like extreme shovelware that is not fun, or it's extremely boring. F tier games all the way. They're really bad, and for me, it's hard for a game to even get down that low to like a 3 or below it, because like if they work, there's usually something good to say. Someone finished a game, but when the game's like unplayable due to it being so bad or just buggy or a mess, but you can still get some time out of it. It kind of falls in that awful 3 out of 10 or F tier category. Jumping back to the other side, we have 7 out of 10 games. These are still C tier games. And honestly, most games kind of fall around here. Usually if you put enough time and effort into a game and you had a good enough idea for it to get published, it's usually kind of worth playing. But these are just like your generic sort of run-of-the-mill decent games. You had an okay time with it. There's not much to say. Like I said, they're C tier. Killzone Shadowfall, a launch game for the PS4. There's not much to say about it. I don't really remember much about it. You run around and you shoot stuff. Like that was it. And I had a good time running around and shooting stuff, but it didn't make an impression either way on me. And there are a lot of games in this category, and they're usually kind of worth your time, but they're rarely worth revisiting. I think you guys know what kind of games these are. You see them all the time on clearance for $5. All right, guys, we're digging the bottom of the barrel here now. On the far extreme, we have a 2 out of 10. These are still F tier. They are awful. They are, as bad as they get. These are games that are like so bad it's painful, or they just don't work, or they're ultra buggy. it's almost impossible to get this low for me. If the game works and it's just terrible, it usually gets like a 3 out of 10, so a 2 out of 10 has to be really bad. I have an example here. I tried to keep everything like modern, like PS4 generation games, but I had to bring this one up. This is Saint on the Wii. This is one of the worst games I've ever played. It's a horizontal shmup, and like, it just doesn't work. They just like copied and pasted enemies all over the screen. There's no rhyme or reason to the patterns. The bullet patterns don't make any sense. You can't avoid them. None of the enemies have like animations, and the main characters don't have any animations. So it's just like clip art, like sliding across the screen. And it's a mess. It's playable. Like, you can play through it. I beat it. I won credit cleared this game, but it's like so bad. It's painful, and you can't understand why anybody would do it. It's torturous to go through it. Another example would be like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde on the NES from AVGN fame. Another good example is a game that is just like so broken you can't finish it. Here's one, Rock of Ages 3 on the PS4. I think is a really good game. I think this is a fantastic game, and I like it a lot. Unfortunately, on about the 6th of like 50 levels on this game, the game crashes. No matter what you do, no matter what system you played on, the game crashes on the 6th or 7th maybe level, and you cannot get past that point. And it's a story mission, and it's required to progress. So you can get about 40 minutes of fun out of this game before it just completely breaks on you. And after that, there's nothing you can do about it. Also, that makes something like a 2 out of 10. You can play it. There's a little bit of fun to be had here. There's a little bit of fun to be had with like the awfulness of this game. But they're kind of in that unplayable territory. Jumping back to the other side, we have 8 out of 10. 8 out of 10 games are great. These would be like B tier, maybe even like sometimes up to an A tier. These are games that are just really good. They're great. They're a lot of fun to play. You had a good time with them. Maybe the gameplay is great or the story is really interesting, but it has something to it that really elevates it above just your generic game. It doesn't have to be perfect at all. None of these games have to be perfect, but it has to have something to engage you and make you feel like you're playing something somewhat special. Shadow of the Tomb Raider, pretty good. The new Tomb Raider series is really, really good. However, it just kind of does the same thing as the other reboot of the Tomb Raider games. And, you know, it's kind of an Uncharted ripoff. It does everything really well, but it doesn't do much super new. It has cool characters, and it's a lot of fun. And you might play through it once or twice, but it didn't take the world by storm. I think everybody thought it was really good, and it's a lot of fun. And there are a lot of games in this category too, and that's kind of what I feel like every game should design itself to achieve, right? It should try to be like good. It should try to be great. It should try to stand out. And that's what 8 out of 10 games do. They're above average. They're fantastic. They're B tier. Staying on that side, we have 9 out of 10 games. These are A tier, high B tier, maybe even S tier. These are games that are fantastic. They have very few flaws. They are a lot of fun to play, or they have a really intriguing story, or they are just great. They're about as good as they can get. They're 9s out of 10s. A good example, Horizon Zero Dawn. Great open world game. Great characters, cool story, fun gameplay. But I didn't feel like it really did anything new. It was a new franchise, and it's amazing that a new franchise can come along and bang out a 9 out of 10 game. I think that's amazing. But it doesn't stand out from the crowd enough to be considered a masterpiece. You know, the other games can achieve this. It doesn't have something so special about it that it's unobtainable. Another good example of like 9 out of 10 games, Inside and Limbo. Striking games that don't have much of a story, but they're like a paradigm shift really, and do something really interesting and unique that's very memorable. I feel like this, even though the gameplay of this, of course, isn't going to hold up to this, and the graphics aren't as good, but this stood out to me a lot more, was a lot more memorable and impactful in my life than this was. Although this was really good, this was great. They're both 9 out of 10 games. All right, we're all the way at the bottom now, 1 out of 10 games. Still F tier, or if there's anything below F tier, this is where these would go. 1 out of 10 games, guys, are the rarest of all games I've ever reviewed. I think there's maybe only a handful of games I've ever given like a 1 out of 10 to. And I don't know. I feel like if a game's playable at all, even for 5 minutes, it's beyond like a 1. It's a 2 out of 10. So for something to be a 1 out of 10 game, I can't even think of an example that I have here. These are games that are like not even games. Like games that like won't even boot up from the start screen. So you can't play it, you don't know anything about it. That would be a 1 out of 10. Or a game like King James Bible on the Game Boy. It's just a reference game or something like that. We have to have a spot to put those, and that spot is like a 1 out of 10. A good example would be a game for the NES called Taboo. I remember when I was a kid, I went to a Blockbuster late one Friday night with my parents and maybe a friend, and we rented a game, and there was this cool game that had a cool cover on it with like a sun. It's called Taboo, and my mom told me that like, oh, taboo means something that's not widely talked about, or is a little secret, or and I was like, oh, that's cool. So we bought it. And it's just a tarot card simulator. There's no games. You like literally just press the A button and it flips over a tarot card. That's it. That's a 1 out of 10 game. Like, it's just not a game. So those don't come along much anymore. But that is what would fall into that category. All right, we're all the way up to the last one, guys. 10 out of 10 games. These are S tier games. They're masterpieces. I mean, they have to have something to them. They're a paradigm shift, or they did something new, or they're so fun or so amazing that it really grips you to a point where you feel like you're changed. Now, they don't have to be perfect. There are games that are 10 out of 10s. Slay the Spire, for me, is a 10 out of 10 game. It's a really fun and interesting game and very addictive with cool music, but like the graphics are just static images with cards on them, playing cards. So like, it doesn't have the greatest graphics ever, but it's still so good. It really, it notches out a place in your psyche. A good example, God of War on the PS4. I mean, it took a beloved franchise and did something totally different with it that was better than it ever had been before, and added a ton of interesting content and a great story and fun gameplay. There's not really anything bad to say about it. It's not perfect. I mean, like you'd say, the gameplay could have been better, or the camera was irritating at times, or on the hardest difficulty, it was too hard or whatever. You can nitpick, but this game is like game of the year. That's what a 10 out of 10 is, a game of the year. It was the best thing anybody made that year, this video game. Now, this personally wasn't even my game of the year that year, but it hung in there with the one that was my favorite. And so 10 out of 10 game, I mean, I don't know how you can argue with something like that. When you play it, you just kind of know. Another example of a 10 out of 10 game, Super Mario 64. When this came out, it was the first real 3D game that worked, and it played great, and it looked amazing, and it was a fun world with fantastic music. There was nothing bad to say about this game when it came out. And I remember as soon as I played it, I thought, man, everything's changed. Video games will never be the same. And they weren't. After this was the first time somebody made like a 3D platformer that really worked. And we've been riding that train ever since. This changed the video game industry. There were 3D platformers before it, but this was the best one when it came out. And since then, people have been just trying to emulate this. Just like people try to emulate God of War on the PS4. Okay, guys, there's me ranting over how I feel games should be reviewed. Most games fall between like a 5 and a 7. I would say maybe 50% of the ones I play kind of fall in that. And, that nice little bell curve. Mine's shifted over a little bit because there's not very many ones that exist. But thanks for listening. I know it's been kind of a shorter video. These are nice to get out occasionally. This is just something I want to get off my chest. Because like I said, people, will play terrible games and they'll give it like, an 8 out of 10 or a 10 out of 10 on Metacritic because they're like, I want to adjust the score. People are being unfair to this game. Or this had my favorite character. It was a Batman game, so I gave it a 10 out of 10, even though the game's not worthy of being a 10 out of 10. Or the counterpoint is you have a game that's like a decent, really good game that people are giving 1 out of 10 to because they're like, the character looks, what was one? I saw a game that someone gave a 1 out of 10 to because they didn't like the animation with the way the character jumped. It was like a skateboarding game. Well, okay, cool. I don't think that's deserving of a 1 out of 10. We need to keep the scale kind of in that bell curve, like I said. But anyway, thanks again, guys, for watching. I really appreciate all the support as always. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and head over to the Facebook page and the Twitter page and follow me there. We're going to have a giveaway coming up pretty soon, and I don't want you guys to miss out on it. So I'll catch you next time.